they're frowning.
Yeah. They're just resting threat face.
They're not a resting threat face. That sounds like a fifth grade slam. You resting threat face.
Okay. Welcome back to Reason Together, the podcast for Christians who think about stuff. I'm Thomas, there's Daniel, and we're back for episode number 130.
Yes, we are. Good morning.
How are you this morning, Daniel?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty well.
Good.
Yep. After spilling my smoothie all over the wall and the floor and stuff like that and getting the shampooer out. Yep. I'm fine.
Yeah. I guess we started a few minutes late today because of your smoothie incident.
Yeah, we did.
I felt bad for you because I was thinking, oh no, I hope that wasn't his entire breakfast. And now he's over at the church building without his breakfast. And now he's going to be hangry on the podcast and be yelling at me.
That's right. And it actually was because of your text. I was like, what? And then I slipped. No, not really. No, it was trying to balance four things with a cup of smoothie on top of your laptop computer as you're unlocking a door and walking through the door. Anyway. So, yeah.
I'm not laughing at you. Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Well, actually, yeah, I kind of am. So I was trying to think of what else I could be doing other than laughing at you. Then my mind was like, no, wait, no, I am laughing at him.
No, actually, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I want to be a good friend.
No apologies needed. You are. All right. So how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Staying busy. And I've been doing some blacksmithing lately.
Yes, so, I saw a video. It was impressive.
Yes, and
nice.
Just got another order.
Did you?
For some of that stuff. So
fantastic.
Yeah, doing a little more of that.
Good deal.
Yeah, and now I heard you. Well, you just finished VBS, didn't you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Had a very good week.
Are you exhausted?
No, I took yes, I was. I took a couple days off and been sleeping in and so I'm feeling pretty good right at the moment. But
good.
But yeah, it was a tiring week. But
those can be tiring. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But things went smoothly, and had several folks jumping in and helping. The weather. The Lord bless the weather. It started Sunday was 91 degrees. And by Monday morning, or Monday, the high was supposed to be 72. It had dropped almost 20 degrees for the first day of Bible school. And then it kind of, escalated a little bit throughout the week. And then Thursday and Friday, rain threatened, but it worked around our schedule. And
someday I'm going to get a compilation of all of the times you've talked about the weather on the podcast and just publish that as a standalone episode. It'd be like an hour long. Of Daniel talking about the weather.
Yes. And it was fun because I may have been the most excited one about it. No, I don't know that I was, but it was pretty exciting to me. I guess I wouldn't say I'm a city slicker, but I'm maybe a country novice. It'd be like the next step. So tractor. So I wanted that we had a farm theme this year, and I wanted, a full-blown tractor. I mean, I wanted a nice big tractor there for the last day and take a group picture around the tractor. Mm-hmm. So one of our farmers lined that up for me.
I saw that.
Yeah, it was a nice big tractor, and
that's not like some folks who maybe aren't from that region might be picturing like a Craftsman lawn tractor, or at the very least maybe one of those tractors you'll see in parades.
Yeah, right. We had like growing up, we had an old Oliver tractor, and yeah.
But this thing was massive. This is like the size of a small house.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I'm serious about that. You ever seen those tiny houses? This tractor looked bigger than one of those. Yeah.
So anyway, that turned out great. And again, the weather turned out nice.
I'm curious. How did they get the tractor there? Was it close enough that they drove it there, or did they like? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Neat.
So that was neat. Yeah. But anyway, so still, yeah. And then we had several young people and just several people helped set up, helped tear down, helped throughout the week. And, when there's so many people involved like that, it really helps it to go more, smoothly. And so I'm appreciative of all the help there. And then looking forward to, some follow up with it too. And
yeah, I have always appreciated the emphasis on your VBSs on really spiritual things. I have been to quite a few VBSs. I have helped in quite a few VBSs at other places. And, just to give you an example, even when you guys do a skit, there is often a lesson in it. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen one where there wasn't a lesson in it. Whereas some use that skit time as an opportunity to just have a break for foolishness. Let's take a break and do something foolish. And I guess I can't say that's, morally wrong in some sense, depending on what they're doing. But, I've always appreciated that there is a spiritual emphasis on every part of the VBS there. And, even just the way that when invitations are done, which I can't remember, do you guys do one just at the end of the week? Or
Yes.
You do. There's this process in which if a child comes forward at the invitation, they're not just ushered right back to go talk to a counselor. There's like a counselor
Right.
to kind of interview briefly, just to see if the child understands what it is they went forward for.
Right. Yeah, you vet.
And that's
them.
Such a crucial step that so many people and places just kind of skip. And I've always appreciated the carefulness in which that was done.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Well, first, as we get started too, let me take a break here and thank our patrons over at patreon.com/reasontogether for your financial investment. We know that the finances is a part of your life. You give your life for money, and you give some of that money to us, and we certainly appreciate that, especially our elite patrons who have access to the after show for the significant contribution you make. Thank you, all of you.
Yes, which brings up the subject here that one of our patrons has upgraded to elite.
Really?
Yes. It was my mother.
Thanks, Tom's mom.
Yeah. So we now have another elite patron.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And I want to mention in relation to that, that one of our elite patrons just recently passed away, and Joyce was a special lady. In fact, as we looked back, she was our very first patron.
Yes.
Some about 4 years ago, I think. We've been podcasting now, and it's probably around that same time, maybe lacking a few months, that we've actually had patrons. But anyway, she was the first on board, and one of the things that I can say that I appreciate about her is her thinking, that she was a thinking woman. She was a Bible student. I mean, that was, I don't know if in how many years, how much time went by without her actually studying the Bible. I mean, she had been part of Bible studies, and even in the last, I think, within the last couple visits I had with her, she was asking me a question, in the Gospel of John about something she was studying, and a question she had there. And she was a neat person, and her husband's a dear saint as well. And so I just want to remember Joyce and praise the Lord for her and her testimony.
Yes, they came out here one time. They were traveling. I think it was on vacation. They were traveling around New York and places up in the Northeast. They stopped in to see us, and we had lunch together and over at the 99 restaurant here in town, and I got to spend some time with them. And she just really had. Boy, I'll tell you, a lot of folks have physical challenges. Some harder than others, and some folks really embody what it means to suffer with grace. And I really think she portrayed that well. Yes, she did. Her testimony was one of staying positive, and she kind of ran the marathon as far as physical things go. Oh yeah. Meaning, I mean, she went through this and that and this and that, and struggled with cancer for years. It was pretty amazing. Yeah, and if you tried to ask her about her, she just tried to change the conversation to ask about you. How are you doing? And it was just a sweet lady. So yeah. Praise the Lord for her. Yes, amen. Well, I'm wondering, as we step into our episode here, whether we have some listener feedback that we might want to deal with before we jump into something else. Yeah, we do have one question here. And this is from, actually, you know what? I don't know that I had the chance to put this into our editorial calendar here yet, but this is feedback on restitution. Did you want to hit that first? Sure. Okay, this is from Elite Patron Justin. He says, "Hi, Thomas and Daniel. I appreciate the discussion about the concept of restitution and its connection with forgiveness. I believe that restitution should be a general expectation when a physical item has been destroyed or monetary damages are incurred. It should never be a requirement as part of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. I see forgiveness as being on the part of the one offended and should be freely offered as we have been instructed by Christ. He references Mark 11:25 through 26, where it says, "And when you stand praying, forgive, if ye have aught against any, that your Father also which is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses." He says restitution should be completely in the control of the offender. Let me think about that. Restitution should be completely in control of the offender. Okay. He says, well, except for legal requirements. The Old Testament teachings suggest that restitution from this individual to the one offended is something God expects, but that is between the offender and him. Any forgiveness we are responsible for is so small in comparison to what we have been forgiven for. Our forgiveness, in the case when restitution should have occurred, can and has been a tremendous testimony and witness. So that is feedback on restitution.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good summary overall.
Yeah, I would say so too. I didn't really see anything I would disagree with there.
Yeah, so you're saying that the forgiveness, is on the part of the offended. The restitution's on the part of the offender, though the forgiveness should be given without it. Right. Yet the offender has the responsibility to consider what restitution should be made, in a sense, between him and the Lord. Yeah, if any.
Yeah. He also, in the same email, gives some feedback on the Scary People episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He says, as for the episode on scary people, it reminds me of a few people I have known. One of my first bosses, for example. He puts bosses in quotes there. He says, I think the phrase today would be that the person has had face threat. Face threat. I haven't heard that before, but I think I get it.
Does that just mean that the person just looks threatening?
Yeah. Just the resting state of their face is maybe,
I was going to say that's funny. Certain people are that way. They just and it's not, and it's not really their fault. I don't think a lot of people, it's just the way I think their face is made up that when they're at rest, they're frowning.
Yeah. They're just
resting, they just look mean.
Resting threat face.
They're not. A resting threat face. That sounds like a fifth grade slam. You resting threat face.
Okay. Oh my.
Oh yeah, well.
It's not taking much to get you going this morning, is it?
Oh man, I'm smoothie deprived.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Anyway, Justin goes on here. He says, that's likely an unfair characterization. Oh. But a quick look revealed that this was the person you had to be careful around, and that someone who is a natural introvert like me would tend to keep back from and not engage in conversation. For me, the scary person was the one who naturally tended towards conflict because I naturally tend away from it. I think I have matured in that aspect since my first job in high school, but, and somewhat related to the Enneagram discussion, I had to gain savvy in how to handle engaging in conversation with someone I knew might be difficult. I still struggle as I feel a lot of inertia to overcome sometimes when presenting the gospel, but God has been gracious. Keep up the good work, Justin.
Good. That's a neat way he phrases part of that, the inertia and the presenting. But I think about that as you're reading that for me, also, I would say to some degree an introverted person, there were certain people, and I wouldn't call them threatening necessarily or scary, but they were intimidating because of maybe their style of conversation. Like they would just ask questions, and they'd ask questions that I feel like, I hadn't really ever thought of that question before, so I don't know how to answer it. So then I feel weird, like I'm awkwardly trying to think through this good response to this question. And for them, it's just boom, boom. It's just they throw it out. And with age, I think I've gained an ability to just feel free with myself to answer those more easily, those questions. But there's certainly I can relate with some intimidation. In talking to certain people. Yeah.
Justin even references the Enneagram episode in there because I guess somewhat of that feeling about conflict can be related to personality, he says. That reminded me, I listened recently to an episode of the Matt Walsh podcast where he took the Enneagram personality test.
Right. Yeah, I heard that.
It is accurate and hilarious. It's pretty hysterical, but
it's funny. Now, I do think he sort of mischaracterizes some things, but it is his whole persona about stuff is funny. Like, I'm not even countenancing that question, or of course I'm that, and no, I'm most definitely this. And so
who wouldn't answer yes to that? Several times he said, who wouldn't say that about themselves? Yeah. And I thought, well, that's accurate. Probably most people would have, say that about themselves. So.
Now, one of our listeners mentioned a YouTuber who had dealt with a Christian YouTuber who had dealt with the Enneagram. And so I watched one of those just last night, actually. And while it's interesting, it certainly still, it says, boy, you certainly have to be cautious. You have to be careful. I can't say based on that YouTube video that he really convinced me differently, because he kept trying to connect the Enneagram to the pentagram without really ever making the connection. He just said, kind of basically like, look, those shapes are similar in this spooky, weird, like demonic. Right. I'm like, wait, what? That it's just a shape. He wasn't really making an argument. He was just more saying, this is demonic. And so then he rattled off all these Bible verses that to me didn't have anything to do with what he was saying, because he never made the connection.
Right. I agree.
So anyway,
I didn't see that video. I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, I do agree with you to try and make that argument. If you're going to argue against using the thing, find a better argument. That one doesn't fit, because the connection between the Enneagram and the pentagram is not a clear connection. It's more implicit in a sense, depending on how you're looking at it. But yeah, so not a good argument.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
so one other one here. Do you want to deal with this? This crypto here? Sure,
we can hit that one.
Okay. Let's see here. Is this patron, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Okay. Asking about, in relation to cryptocurrency, he says, hello, Thomas and Daniel. I am catching up on several episodes. Okay. And then he said, my question is this. I recently made the decision to begin investing in cryptocurrency due to the ongoing devaluation of the US dollar. I've been informed by some well-meaning friends that this is akin to gambling due to the volatile nature of crypto, but I countered that I don't see any difference between this and exchanging currencies, since he's essentially seeing crypto. I mean, it's called cryptocurrency. In addition, I believe I am supporting useful technology. This is my first time investing, and I'm genuinely curious. Is this actually gambling and thus a sin?
Boy, it seems like we talked once before a long time ago about is investing gambling, but I don't think we ever covered cryptocurrency.
No.
What is your degree of familiarity with cryptocurrency?
I wouldn't say I'm very familiar with it. Someone just recently tried to explain it to me, and I thought I understood it. What I thought I basically discerned from the conversation of what cryptocurrency is essentially, it's like a digital reward for doing certain video game-ish kind of things. Like, no, it seemed like after doing so much of this, you earned a certain amount of this in this gaming culture, which was valuable to somebody. Yeah. And thus it becomes a currency, though it is entirely digital. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that was my take on it. What's your thought on it?
The connection to gaming is not really accurate.
No.
Now, certainly there is cryptocurrency that is given as like prize winnings in gaming.
Okay.
But it didn't necessarily, it doesn't have that kind of connection where it's only in the gaming world. Cryptocurrency exists independent of the internet gaming world. I'll be honest with you, I have invested a little bit in cryptocurrency in the past myself. It was $10. So I'm a high roller here, but I did some reading on it, some research on it, and decided I was going to just stick $10 in there and see what it does. And I have never invested any more than that. And basically, whenever it, doubles its money, I just withdraw the
initial investment,
the dividends there, and use it as, petty cash essentially. So, it'll gain $10 and then I'll just leave the original investment of $10 in there to just keep doing what it's doing. But the concept of it, I can see why people would call it gambling, because you are, in a sense, looking at a currency that doesn't exist physically. It's simply, you're hoping that people will feel so destabilized about the actual market, right, that they will invest in cryptocurrency. So the whole thing with it is, I hope that people will lose interest in Wall Street and start investing in cryptocurrency. And it's that hope that it'll just blow up one day that kind of makes people want to put money in cryptocurrency. As of yet, it hasn't necessarily blown up overwhelmingly at this point. It's fluctuated a lot. A few years ago, it did really well. Right now, it's not doing great because the Biden administration is wanting to regulate it more. So people are taking their money out of it. Anyway, all that to say, what makes it different, I think, than gambling is because there's not an exact market watch that people can use to kind of predict the outcomes of it. And I'm not a huge investor. I'm not an expert in things like that, not even close, really. But at least with businesses where you can buy stock in them, you can kind of see the trend of their business overall. You can kind of gauge whether or not they're going to be successful and make an educated guess on supporting something that you think will bring a return. Whereas cryptocurrency, your whole hope is that people will, ditch Wall Street and invest in crypto. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Can you explain a little bit more about what cryptocurrency is? I mean, is it basically just a number on paper? I mean,
essentially,
you say it's a non-physical.
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, you do have to buy into it. You do have to put actual money into it.
Right.
And it just kind of stays there I use a thing called Coinbase, just an app where you can invest in Bitcoin and other types of cryptocurrency. And it's very simple to use, but the money just kind of sits there. So you are putting money into it. And depending on, how people are buying, whether it's Bitcoin at the moment, or I think there's one called Dogecoin or something, and there's several others. Depending on what people are purchasing, the value of something might go up. It's simple supply and demand. If people all of a sudden jump on, Bitcoin or another one of these other coins, it creates kind of implicit demand for it, which would make the price for it eventually go up.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me. I can't, and this doesn't necessarily have I'm not speaking to the questioner here about, is it gambling? It's interesting to me to say, I can't quite wrap my mind around investing in a non-entity. I mean, in a sense, now maybe someone would say that's all stocks are, they're just numbers on paper. But you actually own part of a business in some way.
Yeah,
but
so it is different.
Yeah, with cryptocurrency, it's just like, well, what is it? I mean, what am I putting? What am I buying?
It's kind of a popularity contest in a way, as far as which cryptocurrency is doing well right now, and it kind of is, in a sense, buzz marketed in a way. When people feel like it's going to go up, it tends to go up because people start buying things. So it's not really, and again, I'm not an expert on this. This is just my basic understanding on the little bit of research I did on it. And I took like a free online course on it just to see what it was all about. But it's not tied to an actual business that you can say, okay, their projections have looked good, so I'm going to invest in them. You can't really say that. It's kind of more about what everybody's feeling it's going to do.
That's interesting. And like with, but you have to admit that even with the American dollar, it's not tied to any standard. It's only the value that people place on that piece of paper. And the same thing is true with crypto, that it's just a value that somebody places on this thing. So it really is a currency. If somebody says, you can come to my shoe store and pay in crypto, all right, well, it's a currency. You know what I mean? Whether it doesn't have a standard or not. That's interesting.
I feel like we need more feedback on it from other listeners, maybe who have done some research on it too. Because I feel like, even though I took a free online course on it, that doesn't make me an expert in it. So I feel like I'm talking a little bit outside of my scope. And I've only ever invested $10 in it, and I've gotten returns on that a number of times. So it's made a good bit more than that over and over. But I don't feel like an expert at it. If that makes sense.
Well, so maybe a listener could give us an explanation of sort of what it is exactly. as far as going back to the whole investing versus gambling thing, to me, that's somewhat on a spectrum. It has to do with motive, with investigation, with, the solidity of the investment. Because even if you go into, say, a mutual fund, you have high risk and low risk. And within the mutual fund or within, the funds themselves, I imagine that individual stocks are more or less volatile. So there could you could ascribe, well, that's a gamble. But when you mix all of them together, overall, they have, a growth rate. And so that's kind of a subjective question as far as when something becomes gambling, unless basically you're just going, oh, sure, $5, I hope I roll a 6. That's kind of a...
Sort of, but in the actual business world, hard work does pay off. So I would say it's not as much of a gamble if you're investing in the right things. If you've ever started a business, then you know what it's like to put out investment capital in starting something, and you feel like you're gambling. But then you start to work hard to make it pay off, and hard work does pay off. It really does. So it's not as much of a gamble if you're willing to do the work. It's just when you're investing, you're paying someone else to start the business and do the business and run everything. So you're not doing the physical work yourself. You're investing in their work. So if you think they're going to work hard and do the job well and they have a track record of doing so, I don't see that as a gamble as much, really. Really at all, because hard work pays off. Whereas something like crypto, what am I investing in necessarily? Popularity. Whatever the current mood is about crypto, in a sense, dictates how crypto moves in the market. Of course, that changes when governments try to regulate it, but whatever.
So thank you for the question, and we again welcome any feedback that we might have. reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Now, if we don't have more that we want to cover right now, we had wanted to here, a couple weeks back, and we didn't get to it because we were dealing with listener questions, which is fantastic, and we love to deal with those. But we had wanted to talk about some blog posts here a little bit. We're excited that recently we were privileged to be able to start the Reason Together blog, and we invited several authors to volunteer an article for us. And so we already have, I'm pulling it up here, but what is 6 or 7?
7, I think.
7, okay. Articles there. You and I have each written one, but only one, I believe. And others are from...
There's still one in the pipeline. I think another one. We're expecting another one.
Yep. So it's neat to have others on board. It's neat to see what's been produced already. And so just kind of wanted to throw out a couple of these articles for for discussion. One that kind of took me off guard I was like, wow. After I got done, I was like, wow, that was a really good statement of that. Was written by a Stephen Heinball, and he writes this article giving back a statement. But what it is he makes a case, and about the best case I think I've ever seen, and I don't know that people hardly ever make a case for church membership. And so to ask our listeners, if you had to make a case, why church membership? Why is that a big deal? Why not just go and sit in the pew and enjoy the preaching? What's the big deal about church membership?
Yeah.
Heinball here basically takes the approach from Hebrews where it says, them that have the rule over you. And his take on it is that he doesn't have the rule over everyone who walks through the door.
Right.
He only, this pastoral personage has the rule. He has an obligation to watch for the souls of those who basically covenant in the church together to be under his shepherdship.
Right.
And so anyway, anything else you want to say about that before?
No, I just think it's a really sensible argument to be made. And I think a lot of times people misconstrue having the rule over you, and we hear that and we think, oh, how ugly, the idea of a pastor having rule over people. It sounds so authoritarian. That's not what Pastor Heinball is getting at in the article at all, really. It's just the concept that someone has to have the accountability. Someone has to give the account for your soul, according to Hebrews. And according to Scripture, it's the pastor that's going to do that. But am I accountable for people who, visited and then didn't stay? Am I accountable for people who For instance, if you and your family came and visited
Right.
on a Sunday, am I now accountable for you and your family? No, of course not, because you've not covenanted in that relationship with our church here to place yourself under the pastoral accountability. So it is an accountability relationship, and that might be why that might be a more modern way that we would say that is accountability.
Okay. Now, to parse it out a little bit, could we say then that there are believers who exist? They call out to God, they are born again, but they're not under the rule of anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are some who would say that they would dichotomize. How would you say it? They would dichotomize the family of God and the church, right? We would say that the church is the body. The body is the church. Jesus is the head of the church. So a person can be born again and be part of the church, but not be associated yet with a local church.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Right.
I think some would argue with the language that you use there, but it's semantical, really. It's the same.
But they would, talking of semantics there, they would say, well, that person who's not connected with a local church isn't part of any church, but he is the family of God. Kind of think with that thought in mind, the accountability issue, are there some believers not having connected with the church then who technically don't fall under Hebrews because no one's has the rule over them?
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying? I mean, so when he says, obey them that have the rule over you, he's talking to people that have committed themselves to a local accountability in the congregation under their shepherd.
Voluntarily. Yeah. And that's even the way that Pastor Heinbaugh says it, is he says the pastor only has the rule over and will only give account for those believers who have voluntarily submitted themselves under his spiritual authority. How does he know who they are? How do you know who you're accountable for? Well, because of this church membership relationship. When someone voluntarily says, I covenant together with this church to be accountable here.
That makes sense. And yet the flip side of that I'm wondering about when I look at Hebrews 13:17, and it says, obey them that have the rule over you and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls as they that must give account, hence the title of the article.
Giving back a statement. Yeah.
That they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. It seems like in our generation, the concept of church membership is so light and transient in a sense that you don't like what I'm doing? Fine, I'll go somewhere else.
Consumerist.
It's very consumerist.
Churchgoers, yeah.
So in that day when he's like, you don't want them to have to give an account with grief because that's not good for you. Well, in our day, it seems that they would say, well, if you're grieved with me, I don't want you to be my shepherd, and I'm gone. Well, then he doesn't have to give an account of them, although I guess maybe he would at the judgment seat to say, Lord, I shepherded them to this point, and then they stepped out from under my shepherdship. There's nothing else I could do. I'm sad to say, that they didn't return. This was the state of their relationship with the body and with you. So I guess he is still giving an account at that point. But do you see what I'm saying? Kind of like they would actually in that day, it sounds like, they would have been in that relationship of accountability and yet struggled with submission and not been living up to, say, a standard. And yet in our day, it's like, well, if I'm not living up to your standard, forget it.
Right.
And that's not true of everybody.
Yeah. And this is saying that really the ideal is that when someone is born again and baptized and added to a local church, that from that point going forward, there should never be a time in their life where they are not connected via membership to a local church. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean you have to stay at the same one the rest of your life. I mean, sometimes people move. Sometimes churches close their doors and so on. Various other things can happen. But that's why we have this whole transfer of letter procedure that has emerged, in which, one church, in a sense, releases you in good standing to the church that you are going to after, because there should always be someone who can give back the statement for you. So, I mean, if you've moved around and you end up at the judgment seat of Christ someday, there'll be multiple pastors there who will give an account for various stages of your life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sure.
Yeah.
So that was, so if you haven't read that article, you take a look at that called Giving Back a Statement. and think through that. Follow his line of reasoning there. See what you think.
Yeah.
And now, as I understand it, can they leave? I'm looking here. Yes, you can actually leave comments right under the blog posts themselves.
Absolutely.
There's also suggestions of other blogs, so you can kind of give your thoughts right there. You don't have to go to someplace else.
It has been that way on our website since the beginning. You could comment on
even
podcast episodes. You can comment on blog posts or anything else that's posted on reasontogether.fm. There's a whole place for conversation right underneath it. So I encourage you, the listener, use that right there on the website. No need to go anywhere else. You can just start the conversation right there and utilize that feature.
Plus, you can link it right to Facebook, Twitter, or what's the heart? I see a Facebook, Twitter,
just
Pinterest,
favoriting it.
That's it, favoriting it on the site, or just saying somebody liked it. Okay. Well, very good. And then it seemed like there was, let's see here, pull it back to the Demas defection. Do you remember this one? I recall it's been a few weeks since I've a lot of waters crossed under the bridge since I read this, but it was a neat thought. Because again,
this is by Pastor Blair, Scott Blair of Willow Grove Baptist Church in Waynesburg, Pennsylvania.
He mentions in the beginning of the article, he said this verse is often cited as a warning to believers of the dangers of worldliness, and rightly so. We say, Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. Okay, somebody gets to loving the things of the world, loses his interest in, spiritual things, and so he departs. But he says, however, could it be that the phrase, having loved this present world, is talking about a type of worldliness other than the carnal worldliness often associated with this passage? Could the phrase be a reference to Demas's fear of a martyr's death? Interesting thought there. As he faced the reality that Paul would be executed for the faith. So then he makes three observations regarding that, and then he references, which I think is kind of powerful, the whole pandemic of 2020, and the fear there. He mentions Baptist people have always been willing to sacrifice for the sake of truth. I mean, my goodness, if you look back to how many martyrs there truly were in the Baptist faith. I think just of the Waldensians themselves in northern Italy there, and sending out missionaries, and yet being kind of driven out, being pursued and persecuted and killed. And then he says, as 21st century Baptists, we have absolutely no experience with real persecution and are completely untested with regard to how we might respond in the face of severe persecution or martyrdom. If the response to the coronavirus pandemic in 2020 is any indication of how Bible-believing Baptist people would respond to such a test, the results are not good.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point because rather than saying Demas was thinking particularly about specific aspects of the world, like worldliness, the carnality we think of today, entertainment and all these other things. I can't think of Demas that way, I guess, in that culture, but could it be that it just means a general love of this life more than the next?
A love of life. He doesn't want to lose his life.
This life in particular.
Right. There's this physical life.
this present world. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point that Pastor Blair is driving at there, that perhaps maybe Demas just loved this life more than he should have.
Which is interesting when you think about, and I know we discussed it, and I'll make a comment about this, that a listener feedback too, in just a minute, but we discussed this in a few different episodes about how to handle government regulations, how to handle the shutdowns and things like that. And I know here in our part of the country, it really was fairly limited. It was really 6 weeks down, 6 weeks semi-down, and then it was kind of back to normal in a way. Now, we live in a tri-state area, so the other states were different. But anyway,
6 weeks?
Think about, 6 weeks actually closed down, 6 weeks sort of semi-closed down, I think. And then after that, it really wasn't. Now, again, it did extend for longer depending on where you're at, especially like medical institutions, maybe things like that. But you think about people
forever here.
Yeah. You think about people who, for, say, fear of whether it was government reprisal or fear of getting sick and that small potential of death, avoided church for a year, year.
It's a shame.
That's an interesting what do I say there? An interesting testimony. Now, I was going back to that statement. Somebody said to me just recently, you guys need to go back and give one more like post-COVID episode because he said, you guys changed over time. That was his take on it. And so I kind of gave my thought on it as he was, in that conversation a little bit. But there was some evolution over time, which is to be understood. But anyway,
sure.
that was his thought. So you ought to have a post-COVID episode, essentially, where do you stand on it now, I guess, in hindsight?
Well, and that doesn't necessarily mean, that's not a bad thing.
No.
I think some folks view faith as saying, I made a decision by faith at the beginning and it never changes. And that's kind of ignorant, if I'm being honest.
If somebody says, I haven't changed in 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Growth has changed.
Right. So I don't think it's a bad thing because, we are still following information as it comes in, and we're using discernment with each new thing that we hear about and each new thing that we read as far as current events goes, and we have to make decisions about each of them as they come in. Mm. So of course you're going to see some evolution over time in what we're saying and what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We try to keep people apprised of that.
It basically was that I had the right position all along and that you finally, sort of conformed to my way of thinking. No, just kidding. No, that's not what he said, but anyway, that actually is our time for today. We've dealt with some listener feedback and a couple of these articles. And again, we invite you to go to reasontogether.fm/blog, or just go to reasontogether.fm, scroll down past the podcast episodes, and toward the bottom of the page is our blogs. And just take a look there, and there are some for your reading, more coming out, and we'll keep producing those. Let us know what you think. Give us some feedback either right there on the blog page under each article, or at reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you're a patron, you can be responding and having a discussion on the Patreon page.
Yeah, we do appreciate you being here. We are encouraging balance, developing perspective, and connecting faith to practice. This is Reason Together.